Game of Thrones, Season 8, Episode 5, TV review. Well, if the past few weeks have shown anything, it's that a lot of people on the internet have opinions on Game of Thrones. I'm going to make a quick disclaimer that I tend to make these reviews right after I've seen the episode. And then usually what happens is in the week that comes, I read or listen to a lot of other people's reviews, and I noticed all the things I missed. And then I'm like, oh yeah, that I totally didn't pick up on that, or I should have noticed that, or somebody will give a much more intelligent breakdown than I will. So this is the dangers of putting yourself out on the internet. Not that anyone's given me a rough time or been mean to me or anything like that, but just the danger of being wrong. So I say that because I fully anticipate over the next week I'm going to read somebody who's much more intelligent than me break this episode down, and then I'm going to adjust my opinion accordingly. But that being said, here's my opinions right off the bat. I've been complaining about this and that the whole time. I complain a lot here. But to give credit where credit is due, this last season was really an impossible task. I mean, the plot had gotten so complicated by this point. There were so many characters that had to be juggled that there was really no way the writers could have done credit to everything. Which makes it all the more impressive when they almost pull it off. When they're almost kind of wrapping up all these story arcs in a satisfying way. It's not perfect, but then it was never going to be perfect. It was an impossible task. So I am generally in awe of how well the writers have been pulling this off. And for the most part, kind of wrapping up what needs to be wrapped up and finishing the story arcs that need to be finished up in what feels for the most part like an organic way. So the Night King thing got wrapped up. Now we're going to the final thing with the Iron Throne. And a number of storylines kind of being wrapped up here. The final battle between the Hound and the Mountain. Cersei and Jaime Lannister finally kind of getting their story arcs complete. What other story arcs got wrapped up in this episode? It feels for the most part like they're doing the best job they can with the mess they have. And it's a wonderful mess. I mean that's what's made this series so fascinating to watch over the past 8 years, is that the plots just kept getting more and more complicated. So I mean mess in the best way. But yeah, it was always going to be hard to resolve. Right. So the big thing from this episode, and spoilers by the way, is Daenerys Targaryen kind of losing her mind and kind of turning against the city and kind of burning everything up. Now, this had always been on the cards right from season 1. So right from season 1, Daenerys Targaryen was always a sympathetic character. You felt for her, but she could be vindictive. And I don't remember any of the characters' names, but right from season 1, where she burned up that lady at the end of that season. You remember that? She tied her to the funeral pyre and had her burned up along with the dead bodies and the eggs. And that's something they've kind of kept with all throughout the season, is hinting that there's this vindictive side to her. There's also been a somewhat entitled side to her that they've kind of kept throughout right from season 1, that she feels like she is entitled to that throne. So, yeah, the past couple seasons, season 7 and season 8, it seemed like they were setting her up as the rightful queen, and you had a number of kind of sympathetic and smart characters going over to her. I mean, her followers were almost much more impressive than she was. In fact, I think you can get rid of that almost. The people she had attracted to her cause were much more impressive than she was. So it did seem like she was kind of setting up for the Iron Throne, and then right in the second to the last episode, that vindictive side of her came back. Now, it's always a way you could have gone with this character had you pushed it to the extremes, because those elements had always been there. I guess the question is, did you have to push it to the extremes? Or to put it another way, would it possibly have been more interesting to keep her as a conflicted character? Kind of to keep her as, okay, she's a good queen, she wants to do what's right for the people, she's bringing in this new age of justice and peace and mercy, but there is this kind of small element of vindictiveness to her, which comes out in maybe small ways. Like right at the beginning, when, what was it? Sorry, I'm terrible with the names. Varys? When she executes her advisor. That was maybe even by her standards a little bit extreme, but it did kind of show this small element of vindictiveness to her. And you could have maybe kind of kept it like that, like she's ushering in this new age of peace and tranquility, and she cares about the people, but don't ever cross her, because she could be quite brutal on an individual level with people who crossed her. That might have been more interesting, or a more kind of complicated character that would have been more interesting to resolve. And yeah, before I forget to mention this, right at the beginning of the episode, we were kind of setting up classic Game of Thrones, in which kind of each character was sympathetic in their own way. So like you could see Daenerys Targaryen's side of it. She feels like Jon Snow has betrayed her by giving out that secret. You can kind of see why she feels it's necessary to execute Varys. On the other hand, you can totally see Varys' side of it. And you can see Peter Dinklage's side of it. What's the name of the character? Yeah, and then you can see Arya's side of it, where she's going in to kind of kill Cersei. But you can also see Jaime Lannister's side of it, where he's going in to save Cersei. And you can see Peter Dinklage's side of it, where he's trying to negotiate kind of behind the scenes with Daenerys Targaryen. And you can see Jon Snow's side of it. And this has been kind of classic Game of Thrones, where there's a number of motivations. You can kind of see everybody's side of it. Now, it's, as I mentioned in the last review, we're getting to the point now where they should be simplifying things instead of complicating things. At the same time, they want to keep you watching right to the last episode. So they're going to keep complicating things and try and keep you guessing right until the end. So that was the setup at the beginning of the episode. Classic Game of Thrones. I was like, oh, right, yeah, this is interesting. I can see things from everyone's perspective. I legitimately didn't know who I wanted to succeed. Did I want Daenerys Targaryen's view to win out? Or did I want kind of, well, what would be the other point of view? Kind of, no, I guess, obviously you wanted Peter Dinklage's side to win out, right? You wanted mercy to be shown. But you could also see where Daenerys Targaryen was coming from. I'm rambling, sorry. Point being, at the beginning of the episode, you had a number of different motives, and you could kind of see where each one was coming from, and you didn't know quite who to sympathize. You kind of wanted them all to get their way, but you knew that the plot is bringing them into conflict. And that's just classic Game of Thrones. Like, that's the series at its best throughout the 8 seasons has kind of had that. And then Daenerys Targaryen lost her mind and started burning down everything. And that kind of makes things a little bit clearer. All of a sudden you're like, okay, I get it. I'm no longer supposed to sympathize with this character. The writers are kind of making that very clear. And again, not to repeat myself too much, but that always has been on the card somewhere, right from season 1. But you didn't have to push this character to the extreme. Now, why did she lose her mind? I guess they kind of set this up in the previous episode, where her, what was the name of the character again? Missandei? Sorry, I'm going to butcher all the names. You know, kind of her very kind of beloved advisor, somebody who she'd been very close to, was just kind of killed right in front of her eyes. And at the time, in retrospect, this sounds obviously naive. At the time, I didn't see where this was going. You know, I thought, okay, this is kind of to heighten the tension, to give them more motivation to fight. In retrospect, it seems obvious that they did this to give her motivation to lose her mind. Which I guess brings in the question, okay, was this a bit contrived? Because Cersei killed her, right? So was it contrived for Cersei to kill her when Cersei seemed to have nothing to gain by that? Or was this just kind of classic Cersei being Cersei? I mean, I guess what you want for a fan of the show is you want to believe that all these character motivations are organic. The characters are doing what the characters would naturally do anyways, not that the characters are doing what they need to do to advance the plot. I think you could make the case that it's all organic, maybe. I mean, Cersei has always kind of been like this, kind of vindictive and a little bit unpredictable. And then that... Yeah. If I'm going down this route, are the character motivations all organic? I think this probably gave Daenerys Targaryen plenty of motivation to want to see Cersei dreadfully punished. Where the show is losing me a little bit is where Daenerys Targaryen was burning up the whole city. And they completely kind of lost all subtlety here, didn't they? I mean, you could have maybe made the case, you could have shown something. You could have added an alternative episode where there's a lot of bloodshed, but it's all kind of necessary bloodshed, or it's gotten to the point where it's outside of Daenerys Targaryen's control. Like, you know, kind of troops kind of running wild and pillaging the city, which has happened so many times in history, right? I think I was reading a biography of Alexander the Great a couple of years ago, where there was this one city, and it was not in his strategic interest to loot and pillage it, but his troops had just got out of his control at this point. Sorry, that's a digression. Yeah, you could have shown that, where she would have been responsible for the bloodshed in the sense that she had pushed a confrontation where she didn't need to push a confrontation. But she wasn't actively slaughtering innocent people. And that maybe would have been more interesting and more morally complicated. But that's not the route they went with. They pushed this so that the morality was extremely black and white. She was riding on this dragon as it was just burning up the city. And they made a point of showing that it was not burning up the soldiers, that she was actively burning up the civilians. And they made I think it was fairly obvious that she knew what she was doing at that point. And so that maybe is out of character. She's always been vindictive in small ways, but she's never been vindictive in big ways. I guess the way to justify this is that she kind of lost her mind because she saw her beloved advisor beheaded in the previous episode. But that's a little bit of a leap. She's been through a lot. I don't think she's had a lot of important people around her die. Yeah. So, up until that point, it was fairly ambiguous where they were going to go with this. I mean, sure, there were some characters that wanted Jon Snow to be the king. But there was also a very good reason for wanting Daenerys Targaryen to be in control. And now it's fairly obvious that Daenerys Targaryen cannot be in control. So I guess we're going with Jon Snow. Although, I guess something that's not in Jon Snow's favor is he did not do a very good job when he was made the leader of the Night's Watch. And I'm told that this was even clearer in the books. In fact, I guess that's where I'm getting this from. But it was there a little bit in the TV show. I haven't read the books. Yeah. So, I guess the next episode, it's fairly obvious where this is going, right? Daenerys Targaryen is not going to be sitting on the Iron Throne unless we get some sort of like pessimistic kind of, well, this is the real world type ending. But that's not where they're going, is it? They're going to go for an emotionally satisfying ending. Yeah, it occurs to me, actually, this is a bit of a digression, but they keep talking throughout the episode about we're going to bring in a new era of justice when we get a rightful king sitting on the Iron Throne. And to be fair, this is historical. I think kind of historical, you know, when they've been kind of fighting for the throne, the claimants to their throne have always kind of framed their cause in just this way. But, you know, the problem with hereditary monarchies is that only lasts throughout the lifespan of whoever is sitting on the throne. And after they die, all bets are off. Because, you know, you just get kind of the genetic lottery of whoever is coming in. Of course, to be perfectly fair, maybe that's also true with republics and presidential systems. I mean, Obama kind of framed his presidential campaign of we're bringing in this new era of change. And what did he say? He even gave this speech where he said this was the moment where the ice cap stopped receding. I think when he won like a primary victory against Hillary. But yeah, that only lasted 8 years, and then we're right back to the... It's not a complete lottery in a Republican system, but, you know, there's a certain element of randomness to it. There is never in history a new era of kind of justice and mercy, and there's never a new golden era. Golden eras have a very short lifespan, and then it's right back into the chaos. But I guess Game of Thrones has always been kind of part history and part fairy tale at the same time. Anyways, I'm rambling. The things to praise about this episode. Wow, we have... I mean, I know people have been talking about this for a long time, but it's very obvious now. We've gotten to the point where the line between movies and TV is so thin. I mean, this was like a big budget movie. This would have been like a big budget movie 20 years ago. I mean, 20 years ago, you could have put this in the theaters. Yeah. That dragon scenes, the CGI with the dragon and the explosions and the crumbling castles and everything. Oh, another nitpick. That dragon destroyed some of the buildings way too easily, didn't it? I mean, I know it can breathe fire, but sometimes it seemed like the dragon just breathed a little bit of fire and the whole thing just collapsed. To be fair, I think if memory serves, they did set this up in previous seasons, where whatever the dragon is breathing, it's not just fire, it's some sort of like supercharged something, which is kind of collapsing whole buildings and stuff like that. But yeah, wow, impressive. Yeah, so sorry, I lost my own train of thought. The dragons, the crumbling castle, you know, the battle between the mountain and the hounds right as the castle was crumbling all around them. I was a little bit emotionally exhausted by this point because we already had several climactic showdowns. But yeah, wow, that was well done for what it was. Brutal. I thought, do they need to get that brutal? You know, right when he's squeezing his eyes and he gets stabbed through the head. But, you know, again, this is Game of Thrones. Like, it's been brutal before, right? Yeah, satisfying end to both of those character arcs. Jaime Lannister, I guess that was a satisfying end to his character arc as well, and Cersei. Euron Greyjoy got what he had coming to him, so yeah, that's about all the character arc you need with him, huh? yeah, Arya Stark, I guess we'll see what happens with her character arc. But I thought that was kind of good character development where the Hound kind of had that talk to her, like, look at me. Do you want to be like me? Yeah. I mean, again, you can complain about all this stuff, and I'm sure people will be complaining all this week. But what a glorious time it is to be a nerd. To be into fantasy. And I've always been a geek. And to have kind of something with this much budget and kind of this much care on it. Oh, sorry, this is obviously unscripted, so my brain is jumping all over the place. But that scene right at the beginning of the battle, where they're kind of setting up, okay, Jaime Lannister is here, Arya Stark is here, Peter Dinklage is over here. That was just kind of classic. Good kind of cinematography where they're kind of showing each character's face as they disappear into the crowd, setting up all the different motivations that are going to kind of play out throughout the episode. That was really good as well. So, yeah, I guess as always, the danger of giving an episode by episode review is each episode is only part of the story, so you're not fully going to see how this pays off until it pays off in the next episode. Meaning you're always going to be kind of tentative. Like, if this pays off the way I think it will, this is a really impressive character development or something like that. But that being said, if all this pays off the way I think it will, it was pretty impressive. Yeah, and then we'll see what happens in the final episode. Wow, it's been a long time, hasn't it? All these seasons of Game of Thrones, it's kind of surreal to think is actually ending. But here we are.